Hey everyone, this is another He-Man episode review video, and this time I'm reviewing Like Father, Like Daughter, Creatures from the Tar Swamp, and Dawn of Dragoon. Why these three? Well, if you remember back in my first Top 10 He-Man episodes video, these were all featured on it. Also, these are the first three He-Man episodes I ever watched, and thus have a special place in my heart. I also never did reviews for any of the original Top 10 episodes because when I did my first review series, I felt I wanted to focus on other episodes in the actual review videos and just quickly showcase my favorites and least favorites in their own separate videos. However, I've obviously done reviews of my favorite and least favorite Season 2 episodes since I didn't get around to remaking the top 10 until much later. And the same is true of She-Ra, though there I actually ended up waiting until I'd seen the whole series before I listed my favorites and least favorites. So this does not mean I plan to do videos on all my old top and bottom 10 episodes, but I always felt bummed out that I never did anything for any of these. So I decided I'd do reviews for at least some of them. And my first He-Man episodes felt like a good place to start. The episode, Like Father, Like Daughter, actually has a very standard plot premise. Skeletor has sent Beastman and Trapjaw to the abandoned fortress of Stardika to build an army of Serpentoids to take over Eternia. The Serpentoids are these two-headed robot lizards. During the initial run-in with this lightning ball, Duncan gets captured by Beastman. Once inside the fort, He-Man discovers that though he can fight off the Serpentoids, they just keep coming. In the meanwhile, Teela is fixing a laser lasso that was shown at the start of the episode and then comes to help He-Man. The bad guys are defeated, the production line is frozen, and Duncan is saved. So really, nothing super fancy about this episode, though you can probably spot a few of my favorite elements easily. Now, why on earth did I put this in the top 10 originally? Well, the thing is, while the story of this episode is frankly a little simple, it's the execution which is damn near flawless. Keep in mind that this is an early Season 1 episode, but I feel it has some of the most solid episode direction from the whole show. What I mean by that is how the music and actions work well and the episode takes enough time to establish shots, but never too much. For you see, lots of early He-Man episodes suffer from one of two problems. Either the pacing is a little frenetic and stuff happens a little abruptly, or stuff takes forever to actually conclude, whether it's holding on to scenery shots for too long or just focusing on a piece of stock animation for a little too long. I think this episode always takes enough time for each scene, but never overstays its welcome. Yes, there are animation errors. During the fight with the Serpentoids, He-Man's sword is literally all over the place. But there's some really funny quips in this episode, which I've always enjoyed. I've never really liked the laser lasso. I think even as a kid, I kinda understood it was just a MacGuffin. I mean, it literally turns the tide of the fight, so it felt weird that He-Man wasn't even using it in the next episode. Skeletor also never actually faces He-Man in this episode. He's always either in monitors or using spells to talk to his minions. My favorite bit of editing in this episode is the sting from the He-Man choir, which kicks in at the point when He-Man has to get rid of the bomb which Skeletor planned to blow up Duncan with. And yes, I know He-Man does this throwing an explosive thing into the atmosphere all the time, but this was the first time I ever saw it, and they did a bang-up job with it. And I also love that He-Man just carries a scanner to help him find Duncan. That's a random bit of writing that they never really explain. The ending gag is kinda bad. Orko gets freaked out by the lasso because he's been tested on with it earlier, but his reaction is a bit too much. I also don't think Adam just parroting what the sorceress said earlier in the episode and winking at the camera was a very good way to end the episode. He-Man would break the fourth wall occasionally, but it always felt kind of forced. I much preferred it when he was telling jokes to the other characters. So in conclusion, while this episode isn't super novel, it's just so well put together, I always find myself comparing other early Season 1 episodes to it, and basically how much more consistent this episode's direction is in comparison to a lot of other Season 1 episodes. Next is the Creatures from the Tar Swamp, which I'm sure all hardcore He-Man fans are familiar with, as it is Orko's origin episode. I mean, it belongs into a kind of special category alongside Teela's Quest and Prince Adam No More as one of the best character episodes. The plot has to do with Adam's cousin, Lady Edwina, coming to visit and being a snooty bitch to everybody. Now, she's actually less annoying than Jeremy, probably because she's mildly hot.
I swear, if we weren't cousins.
But her role is much less focused as she's really there to teach Orko a lesson about how you can't buy friends. And bros before hoes, I guess. Orko takes a shine to Edwina and tries to impress her by finding his old magic medallion and just stumbles on Skeletor and the crew, bringing ancient Eternian animals to life in the tar swamp. Now, this episode is an all-time classic, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that the episode direction on this one is actually not nearly as good as the first episode I reviewed. There's loads of weird sound effects and art errors, however, the dialogue is immaculate, to the surprise of no one. And this episode also has a couple of brilliant editing moments. One is when Stratos rescues Tila and Duncan, who almost crash while looking for Orko. This scene was my introduction to Stratos, and you can probably guess why I immediately thought he was the hippest cat. Such a shame I didn't know how badly he'd get used in so many other episodes. The other excellent scene is when Orko wishes that none of the day's events had ever happened. The music syncs up so well with the villains disappearing. It's still one of my favorite scenes from any He-Man episode to this day. Now, some story bits are a bit silly. It's cool He-Man struggles with the Dragoon, though this seems a little out of character considering how easily He-Man usually defeats most monsters. I also do have to admit that Lady Edwina is a bit of an artificial story morale character, but I do like that Orko is the one who realizes the lesson, giving this episode a very rewarding ending. So, needless to say, this is one of the best episodes of the show, even with its flaws. It really made me like Orko a lot. Now, finally, Dawn of Dragoon, the introduction episode of Orko's steady girlfriend, Driel. The episode begins with Duncan trying to fix Orko's magic pyramid, and some magic rocks accidentally bring Driel to Eternia. She lets Orko know that a creature called Dragoon is terrorizing his homeworld, so Orko sets off to stop him. None of the other characters can go along with him, because they can't fit in the magic pyramid, except He-Man, who gets help from the sorceress, who is only able to make a temporary portal to Trolla, which requires the person to get shrunk in order to fit through it, and which will disappear by moonrise.
Remember, you must be back here by moonrise.
Got it.
Yeah, they kinda ignore all of this in all future Trolla episodes. On Trolla, Adam realizes that he can become He-Man, and Orko's magic actually works. Driel gets captured by Dragoon, and it's revealed that he's working for Skeletor, draining the Trollan's energy. Eventually, in what I have to say is one of those dumb smart solutions, Adam realizes that he has to say by the power of Grayskull backwards in order to become He-Man.
Grayskull, power thee by!
Because, you know, everything in Trolla is backwards. This episode is just a solid bit of fun as we see Trolla for the first time, but I also really love Dragoon. He's just so creepy, badass, and does actually provide a challenge for He-Man. And He-Man actually ends up saving him when Dragoon almost throws himself into the bottomless pit of Trolla. This confuses Dragoon so much that He-Man decides to leave him to think over his actions. Even though this has shades of Kathos from Revenge is Never Sweet, I've mentioned that Dragoon's turn at the end always came up a lot more natural. And of course, this episode introduced Driel, though unfortunately she really is just a damsel in distress. I've said this before, pretty much all of Driel's other appearances were way better, as she tended to have a more active role in the story. One of my favorite scenes is actually the very ending after Orko showed his face to Driel and vice versa, and it seems the heroes won't make it in time to Eternia. Well, of course, it's a little bit of false tension there. But my favorite point is when Duncan is actually shown to be very concerned for Orko, and I just love how warm and friendly he is at the end. This ending always left me with a smile, because I never knew if Driel would even come back in other episodes. She obviously did, but this ending is just plain old sweet. And that's all from me for now. Until next time, I have the power, so can you.